Friends, welcome to the Teresa Lusk Show, where faith meets freedom and your voice is heard. It is no secret that Texas needs a major overhaul in the education sector. I can tell you right now that we need a major overhaul. We need elected officials to get some work done. Well, my next guest is going to bring some truth to the table. She is an impressive guest. Her name is Jacqueline Martinez, and Jacqueline is an education advocate and content creator. She was a public school teacher for 13 years, and she is pro public education. And she has built up quite a bit of following on social media because of her passion for education. Jacqueline, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Listen, I want to let my viewers know how we met. So, you and I, we were attending a school of campaign for women, and that is political campaign, in case anybody's wondering. You know what's interesting is that you are you a self-proclaimed Democrat? Is that correct?
I am a Democrat.
Okay. And clearly my viewers know that I vote Republican, very conservative. But you know, one of the neatest things that we encountered at this school of campaign is that we were able to talk about our differences. We were able to talk about the things that are important to us. We were able to talk about the things that we disagree with. Were we not just disagreeing with so much, yet agreeing to disagree? Jacqueline, what do you say?
Absolutely. And it was so refreshing to be able to have a conversation that not at any point did it ever become contentious or, I'm trying to persuade you or convince you. Like we both acknowledged we're not going to convince each other. We just want to understand where the other person is coming from. It was one of the best conversations that I've had. And so I'm very grateful that I met you, and I'm really happy to be here.
Well, thank you. Likewise, I have the same sentiments. I really appreciated having those conversations with a lot of people. I wish I could say that I believe it's always going to be like that with everybody at all times, but I don't think that's true, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on. But you know, you are my very first, I believe, my very first non-conservative guest. So I'm honored to have you on because we're talking about a topic that, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, it's very important. We're talking about education. So you were a teacher for 13 years and you just recently left. So it's not like you've been retired, right? Because there's a lot of teachers who, God bless them, but they say, you know, I was an educator 20 years ago. Things are different between 20 years ago and today. So tell me a little bit about your education background and what is going on here. How are we missing it on both sides of the aisle? What's going on with the education system?
Well, there's a lot going on right now. It's no secret that right now we're experiencing a mass exodus of teachers from the teaching profession. It has become a career choice that is no longer sustainable. And when I say that, I'm not just referring to, the low pay. That's one of the factors, but a lot of it also has to do with, a lot of things that I think were exacerbated because of the pandemic. I think the education always had its issues. But I think when the pandemic happened, that's kind of when everything just kind of was magnified. And things just got even worse, I would say. Right now, we have school districts that are struggling to figure out what their budgets are going to be right now. We just had the legislative session where, lawmakers were unable to get funding passed for, public schools. And so right now, these school districts are feeling it. They're in a budget deficit right now. That's scary because it didn't have to be that way. We have a $30 billion surplus in the Texas legislature, and it's just sitting there. So that's frustrating.
Yeah, 100%. That is very concerning. Believe it or not, this might be news to my viewers, but I took a short a teaching position just for a few short months. That wasn't the plan. I was actually, teaching history, and the amount of responsibility that they wanted to put on to me as a teacher was absolutely unbelievable. And so, I had a great leader. So she wasn't the problem. The problem was there was a budget issue, right? And so teachers are overwhelmed, they're stressed. It's actually very concerning, to be honest with you, because there's one word that every teacher that I talk to, including myself when I was teaching, and I don't even consider myself a teacher. I say I taught, right? Because when I get around people like yourself who actually did this for years, I don't get the honor of doing that, but I taught for a few short months. There's one word that every teacher can relate to when she or he thinks about going to work, going back to school. Do you know what that word is? Do you know what it is?
Don't.
Anxiety. Anxiety. You do know it.
I do know.
Yes. So okay, so we know that there's a teacher shortage. We know that there's a lot of budget issues going on. As a former teacher who went through a lot, even maybe, what were some of the challenges that you were experiencing because of the budget issue? What were some of your experiences because of this? Because we need our elected officials to hear this is real. It's not just people who are on the outside saying, hey, there's a problem with budget. No, we are calling out our elected officials to make a change. So tell me, what were some of the issues that you saw that even affect you personally and professionally?
Yeah, for sure. I'll go with personally first. I will say, I think we all know that when teachers go into this profession, we don't do it to get rich. We're very aware that, if we're going to have right? But over the years, teacher pay has not kept up with inflation. And in Texas alone, we are paid below the national average, I think by 8K, 8K, I want to say. Um, and that's a problem because, teachers are, for the most part, the majority are empathetic people. We want to give of ourselves. We want to go above and beyond for our students, and we have no problem doing that. But when you start to feel like you can't even make ends meet, I mean, I don't even know what percentage of teachers have a second job, a third side gig, things like that, just to make ends meet. you know you're doing a disservice to teachers, but you're also doing a disservice to students, because students need teachers who are well rested, who are well compensated, who can go in the classroom and give their all because they're being taken care of. And so a lot of this, when you mistreat teachers, or when you don't take care of your teachers, that can trickle down into the classroom and essentially affect students directly. So
Absolutely. I think it is something that our government really needs to pay attention to. I think there needs to be some funding that needs to be released. I realize that there's a discourse, and maybe I should say disagreement, about what's holding the money up. Are you aware of any of those issues?
I am. I know that a huge reason as to why they weren't able to get anything passed was because Governor Abbott tied funding to school vouchers. Now, something that I will say about school vouchers is that on the surface, it sounds like it's a good idea. They'll say, oh, parents deserve to have choices, and they do. I don't think anyone agrees with that. The problem is that these vouchers are essentially coupons for the wealthy, because what ends up happening is, okay, we're going to give this family a voucher for, I don't know, just an example, $4,000, right? And you can go and use that $4,000 to put your child in a private school. However, what's happened in other states is that when they pass these vouchers, the end up increasing tuition. Typically, it's the wealthy that can afford, private schools. And so these vouchers essentially function as coupons for them. And it doesn't end up benefiting the very people that they're trying to say, oh, this is for those who can't afford it. They're not going to be able to afford it anyways. That's
Okay.
essentially.
Sure. It's interesting that you bring up that point, because this is more of a point that like the vouchers. It's something that I, as a conservative, agree with. And I was talking to a mentor, teacher, about that, because he was expressing his disdain towards the vouchers. And I had to tell him, my children have been in public school before, and they've been in private school. And for me, as a parent, the voucher funds would have been such an assistance, because we did have to cut. A lot of times people don't understand, we did have to cut down, and do without certain things that most people wouldn't know, because it was a personal choice. It was a personal, it was something we chose to do to make sure we could afford it. And so I understand where the, liberal, more Democrat side comes at it, because usually the policies of the Democrats is trying to help those who they consider to be lower income. One of the things that I said to the mentor teacher, though, is that, we are forced as citizens of the state, you're pretty much required to pay taxes. You don't have a choice. You have to. And then the governing body, of course, gets to decide where those funds are going. So, in essence, when you talk to a conservative, we see it as, well, that's technically my money. It's not the government's money, right? So, I like to think through things and go, how can we bring a solution to the table? Because obviously I am pro voucher. You are not so much pro voucher. What could we do? And Jacqueline, I started thinking, why, if we could just both just decide, you need to get what you want and I get what I want. Is that even possible?
Oh gosh, I wish I had the answer to that question. What I do know is that when you take away funds from the public school system, which is already suffering, budget cuts, it's only going to make things worse as far as cutting programs and resources to families that already are in a more like low income, area, which is why, they say, oh, well, these vouchers are to help families afford this. I feel like that's not accurate. That's essentially, it's only going to help the wealthy kind of save on what they pay for private school, because no one's going to be able to afford, private schools. And aside from that, private schools are known to be much smaller, the smaller class size. That's kind of the lure of them, right? Like, oh, they're smaller. They can't handle, this influx of people coming in. They don't have the capacity, the human capacity, or even the resources for that, right? And so I wish I had the answer, but in all honesty, I don't. I know that taking away funding from the public school system would be detrimental.
Sure. And so I'd like to share my opposing view to that. So when you take a position and you say, well, this will take away from those who are already in the lower income brackets. I understand that. I understand. I was a teenage mom. I had some financial struggles for lots of years, actually. And so I completely understand the concern for those who don't have the means to pay for education. I would love to see a something where we can care about everybody. And here's a position that I come from. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I think it helps people kind of think things through. We're not even arguing and pulling each other's hair out and cussing each other out. We're talking about this. I would love to see a solution where we take care of everybody. Here's why. The rich are not an enemy. I don't believe the rich are the enemy, right? I believe that however they got there, sometimes people assume that they got there because their daddy gave them their millions of dollars, whatever. I don't believe that. I know there's a lot of wealthy people that I know that built up businesses and they worked their butts off for it. And when people say, well, it's just a coupon for them, but I believe that they also deserve, like, they're part of society. They pay taxes. They too deserve to be able to use those funds. Then I look at the middle class people who would be, people like yourself and myself, where we could maybe get it done, but it's going to take some scraping, it's going to take some serious sacrificing, et cetera. And then you take the lower income kids who don't have it, period. I would like to serve everybody, and I think that's one of the deficits of people who are in government and in office, that they focus solely on one person. And I don't think we should I feel like it's a form of discrimination to the rich. Um, but we have some excess money in the state that could be injected into the public school system, so that the ones who want the public school setting, the private school setting, can go to it. And so that the middle class, if they want to, I don't believe that, people who sometimes we put lower income students in a bracket and we just say they're never going to be able to afford that. I don't believe that either. I do think that people's circumstances change. I think that, we have a great country where people want to work hard and do some things. What do you think about that proposal? Is that even something that it could be feasible.
I hope so, because what I totally agree with what you said right now is the part where you said, I want all students to be served. I want a win for a public school or a charter school or private school. Like, I want all the students to win. I just don't know what the answer is. But you're right. There's this $33 billion surplus that's sitting there, and there's even money in our rainy day fund for these very things, because all the COVID funding that we got that kind of was injected into schools, after the pandemic, um, it's about to expire, or it has already expired. Sorry, and that's why school districts are struggling now. They're scrambling around trying to figure out what they're going to do, and what they end up doing is they end up closing schools, which is only going to hurt the schools that stay open, because now you're going to have even larger class sizes, more work for the teachers who are already overworked and underpaid. And yeah, you end up cutting programs for students. I honestly don't have the answer. I wish I did, but what I do know
Sure.
is would like for our lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to come solution oriented and really wanting to serve all the students, not just one student. That I do agree.
Sure. Right. Right. And it's funny because your sentiment is coming from not just the well-to-do, and mine is, well, we need to serve everybody. I don't think it's fair to not serve everybody. I do think it's possible, though, Jacqueline. I do think it's possible to come to an agreement. I think what's going to happen, though, is that we're going to have to be okay with both of us, both sides, not getting exactly in everything we want. Do you know what I'm saying? I think the people who don't want vouchers demand it, and they're not going to reach their arm over. The people that do are like, no way, we're not doing it unless we get this and that and the other. And I just think at this point, it is a disservice. Teachers are suffering. But let me ask you this: you brought up the school closures, and I have been informed that the school closures is really awesome. I'm not sure what the percentage of each reason of why the schools are closing, but apparently the school closures is what's contributing to it is that people are having to move out of this area because of, and I don't know what your area is like because you're in El Paso, and but in our area, the taxes are going up so much, property values are skyrocketing, the demand is so high that people can't afford to live here anymore. So you don't get that tax money. Is that what you are aware of, or what do you say to that?
Yeah, there's actually two ways that schools get funded. One of them is through property taxes, and then the other is through the state. And that funding that comes from the state is really dependent on how schools perform on state standardized testing, as well as their attendance and their enrollment. And so right now, that is suffering due to the opening of charter schools. I'm not sure if you're familiar with charter school. Well, yeah, you worked at
I
one,
am.
right?
I was teaching it. Yeah.
Hello. You worked at a charter school, and so it's unfortunate that like charter schools and public schools are kind of like pitted against each other when it comes to funding, because it's kind of the same thing where funds are taken from public school to go into a charter school. Like I said, I want all students to win, but here's where I, it becomes problematic for me. Charter schools don't have to necessarily follow the same kinds of rules that public school do. When you have a public school, you have to serve all students. That would be special ed students, behavioral students. Everyone has to be served, right? Charter schools, on the other hand, kind of get to handpick who they're going to put in their schools, and they get to cap their class sizes. Public schools don't have the luxury of capping their class sizes. Um, the other thing is that, charter schools don't necessarily have to have certified teachers working, on their campuses. And so, when the rules are not the same for both schools, yet they're both held to that same standard when it comes to, testing, it just, there seems to be an imbalance there, a disconnect there that doesn't seem right.
Sure. Okay. Interesting perspective. Again, you are a Democrat, so it does come from a Democrat side. For those of you who are watching, you're tuned into the Teresa Lusk Show, and we have the amazing Jacqueline Martinez. She is an advocate for education. You have a left wing person and a right wing person. We're having these great conversations so that you can get the insight on what do these conversations look like. And by the way, these conversations took place behind closed doors between she and I. And now we're talking about this. This is really interesting. And for those of you who are watching, try not to get upset. You know what I'm saying? Like, try not to get all upset. We're just two adults hashing out the details and trying to see how can we get everything for everybody. So I did work at a charter school, and I will tell you that I actually appreciate charter schools. And I actually have other friends who work for the public school, and they don't appreciate the charter schools, right? Because they say the same thing that you do, and they're not necessarily Democrats, but they are pro more on that side. They do pull over to the Democrat side because they feel like the charter schools take the funding, et cetera. Can I tell you that I'm big on giving opportunity here. Let's talk about charter schools real quick, because, and I'm not saying it because I worked for them, because to be honest with you, whether it was a charter school or public school, I'm not called to be a true educator. I was there for a season, etc. But what I did observe is that um, a lot of the teachers that get hired as in the charter schools, they're highly educated. I myself hold a master's degree. Now I realize that I don't have a specific degree in the subject that I was teaching, which was history, social studies, but I'm extremely passionate about the subject, and I studied, it would take me forever. We've talked about that, the planning, like just planning to bring the best forward for the students. But also, I bel I think one thing we can agree on is that the public school, in many ways, and this sounds kind of like a double-edged sword, like it's positive and negative at the same time. Because on one hand, we have amazing teachers like yourself, who we know you're passionate. You know, I have no doubt you were a great teacher, but also we also almost like we all agree that the education system's failing. So then that means that whatever's been done forever is not working. And I've heard people say, well, we've seen the voucher thing work in other states. Well, what states are those exactly? Because we have to be honest about, where did the research come from? What states are we talking about? Exactly. And how long was the program going on for? Because the truth is, I don't think we've had enough years. I know this is going to sound bad because people are going to say, well, how long do you need to go? Unfortunately, I think anything new has to be tested for a good while. And I think then you have to use the right data to be able to compare it well. Because if you're telling me that it didn't work, well, in which states? And now you have to look at certain things. So I think it wouldn't be a horrible idea to keep testing the voucher thing. Again, though, I empathize with you, because I understand what you're saying about that the public schools are suffering. But I think that it gives everybody, I've heard people say this and they may not like it, that it gives everybody an opportunity to almost like compete, per se, on increasing how well public schools are operating. Now, I will say this, and I think you're going to agree, and we're going to move on to this next topic, is there's so much red tape and demands, such as the STARR test, that I think puts people, teachers, and students at a disadvantage. Jacqueline, I know you're well versed in the whole STARR test thing, which I am so anti-STARR. I just, it's ruining children. I watched the stress they were under. I watched the teachers and the stress they were under. Talk to us about that, because I think that's one of the things we can come full force to the table together.
Absolutely. This is totally a bipartisan issue. That standardized testing, at the end of the day, is a profit-driven business. In order to sell contracts with the curriculum, that offers, rigor and all those things to help prepare, like test prep. These are profit businesses. They are shoved down teachers' and students' throats throughout the year. That is the main focus. If there wasn't one year where I, worked as a teacher where I have students who at the beginning of the year were already talking about how they're afraid of the STAR test that wasn't going to take place until the end of the year. So they already come in with this mindset of like, ooh, there's this big scary test. If I don't pass this test, I'm not going to pass on to the next grade. Um, I had students who, would have these meltdowns because of the STAR. I remember there was one year during the test, the kids are at their desks, they're taking their test. Out of nowhere, this one student just vomits everywhere. And the students that were sitting around her just kind of turned and immediately got back to their test. Like, that's how focused they were on this. Like, no one was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Or handed her a napkin or something. Like, everyone just was like, huh, and just kind of going. And I remember in that moment thinking, like, yeah, this is not okay. Obviously, we got her to the nurse and she went home that day. But just the stress that comes with it, it's just this like unnecessary stress and anxiety that we're placing on students as well as teachers. And it's unfortunate because it's not necessary. Now, me as an educator of 13 years, I'm not saying do away with testing. It has its place in education, obviously, but to put that amount of attention onto this one day test and have it be this like end all be all of everything, I think is very unnecessary and problematic as well.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And one of the things I wish that they would accomplish in this next session is getting rid of this STAR test and letting, coming up with, again, some kind of bipartisan agreement of something that can be done. And by the way, can we please do it with teachers instead of just people who, they want to fill a position? I mean, I really would like to see teachers, uh, a lot of teachers being able to make these decisions, create these tests for students, whatever the measuring test may be, that is not like these teachers will understand the level of stress for them, for both, for the students and for them, and for administration, if we're honest, and for counselors. I mean, everybody, because it takes a whole gang of people to make the STAR test work, right? And so I wish somebody would come up with something creative and get rid of the STAR test, and then maybe even when it comes to the school board or somebody who has authority to make some decisions to get rid of this, that would be great, because I'm not sure what the purpose of this test is, except you're being taught how to pass a test, right? I mean, you're being taught how to pass a test. That is absolutely absurd. It's not working. And those, we need strong, willing, intelligent elected officials to make these decisions with us and say, okay, let's hear out the current teachers. Let's hear out the current educators who are doing this. Let's interview some children. Golly, can we talk to the children?
Very much so. I agree. Amen.
There
um,
you go.
but something that I did want to say about the testing is that um, if it were used for diagnostic purposes, I think I would, be like, okay, there's not this like pressure. Um, but also the fact that funding for schools is tied to these high stakes testing is also problematic, because that's what fuels the anxiety and the hype around this test. That's why, they're constantly pressuring students and teachers. But also, what I wanted to say is that these tests have been proven to be inaccurate measures of student growth. There were, I can't remember if it was a third grade or a fourth grade STAR reading test where there was a poem. Um, the author of that poem couldn't answer the STAR questions. And so, yeah, these tests are not even they don't coincide with the grade level that they're supposed to. So like a third grade level STAR test might actually be testing a fifth grade reading level. So a lot of times it's not even accurately measuring what it's meant to measure. And so that's something too. It's something that parents need to know about this STAR test, because I think parents who are aware of the STAR test and all the the negative things that come along with it, um, they know these things. But there's a lot of parents out there that don't know this, that that they genuinely ask the question, well, I don't understand what's wrong with testing your kid at the end of the year. Absolutely nothing. There's nothing wrong with testing it. Like I said, it has its place in education, but for it to
Mhm.
be what drives the funding to a school district, that I definitely take.
Sure. How about can parents opt out of this test for their students? And if so, how exactly can they opt out?
Yes. So the terminology that they don't want, people using is opt out. They will always say there is no opt out option. It's actually to refuse the test because parents have that ability, to influence their child's education. So they can not necessarily opt out, but refuse the test. And there are different ways of doing it. But I guess I would want to share the resources for that. I don't know if that's something you'll put in the notes or something.
Yeah, we absolutely can.
Yeah, but essentially, you would have your child. You can uh, keep your child home from testing days, but then the thing is, when they come back, the school already has these makeup days. And so there are steps that you can take that you can teach your child to take in order to submit the test without actually answering anything. The
Mm.
problem is that a lot of times school administrators will kind of use these scare tactics to, get parents to allow their children to take the test. They'll threaten them with things like, oh, well, they're going to have to do accelerated instruction tutoring, 30 hours over the summer. Some schools I know have even threatened to not allow their child to participate in electives for not taking the test. They can't do
Wow.
that. The agency has already made that clear. But and I don't know if it's because school administrators are misinformed or if they just don't really care and kind of are taking liberties with just making up their own rules. But yes, they kind of fearmonger or try to intimidate parents into getting their child to take that test. But there have been it's just been a growing number of families who have chosen to refuse the test, and their child still moves on to the next grade level. I mean, it's not um, not as dark as they're making it out to be, like, ooh, you're not going to go to the next grade level if you don't take this test. There's plenty of people who have successfully refused.
Do you know any proponents of the test? Anybody who's like, this is good. We should use this and keep using it and keep testing the students.
I actually don't. A couple, this one was 2021. Senator Menendez in San Antonio put out a survey to all of Texas, asking, for feedback about the STAR, and 97% of parents and teachers agreed that we just need to get rid of the STAR, that the STAR, um, we just need to get rid of it. Um, if I've ever like seen anything that's like pro STAR, it might be comments made on social media where people will say, oh, but then, how are you going to prepare your child for the future? We're babying them, if we're letting them opt out of this test. Um, like I said, testing has a place, but for it to be something high stakes like this that places that unnecessary stress and anxiety on kids, I mean, no, I don't
Yeah.
think they're preparing them for life with that.
Right, right. I'm a hardcore parent. Like I was very structured. I expected a lot from my children. And for me to say it's unnecessary, I want them to be prepared for life. I prepared them for life. I even watched them be so much more independent compared to their friends. The friends' parents were always doing everything for them. So I'm a hardcore parent. And I say that just to make my point that even being this type of parent, the STAR test is unnecessary and it really needs to go. It's unnecessary. It's putting a lot of people through stress. I want to talk about the mental health part of the teacher's life because that is very concerning. I witnessed it myself, experienced some of the high stresses myself. Is that real? Is that something going on? And do you see teachers' health being affected because of what is being demanded of them?
Absolutely. And I can speak from my own personal experience. This was pre pandemic, but there was a year where the stress got so bad that, and this is coming from someone who I tend to be very self aware and reflective of, myself. There was one year where I remember I caught myself being very short fused, being very stressed out. And so, I sought therapy for that. And I remember I they actually ended up putting me on medication for it. And I remember thinking to myself, this is really sad that in order to do my job, I have to be medicated. um, Eventually I was weaned off of it and I no longer needed it. But honestly, I think more of that had to do with the fact that I switched school districts and I had found a school where, I had an excellent administrator who was very supportive, and just the climate and the culture of that school was just a complete 180 from where I'd been. So I know that had a lot to do with it as well, but it still demonstrates that there are some schools out there where it can get really ugly and nasty for a teacher. And if a teacher is not in the right headspace, how are they going to give the best of themselves to their students? It
Right.
wouldn't be fair to ask that of them. So that's
Right.
health. When it comes to physical health, what I will say is that since leaving teaching, I've been out of the classroom for a full school year now. Um, my health has just done a complete 180, to the point where when I went to the doctor recently, she couldn't believe she was looking at my file. When she did, my blood work came back fantastic. I had never had blood work that positive, that great. That she told me, she's like, I have to make sure it was your file. And it just, for me, I you have to be able to be self-aware enough and to be willing to set yourself apart from that space to give yourself an opportunity to be your healthiest self. And it's unfortunate because I would love to still be in the classroom. I miss it every day. I miss my kids all the time. But I know that if I were to go back, my health would just
Yeah, I believe it. I had a teacher tell me, she said, Teresa, if she said, if I could just quit my job right now, my health would improve tremendously. And I've heard that. And some people may be watching and going, well, why are you in then why are you in education? Why are you in there? If and the thing is, well, a lot of people are leaving, they are leaving. They are responding to the high levels of demands. And not just that, Jacqueline, you end up dealing with some behavior issues. Like a lot of the stress has to do with the demands that they put on teachers, but also then you have behavioral issues. And I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of the behavioral issues have to do with the lack of parental discipline. If you talk, I don't know what it was like for you, but I can tell you it was more of a discipline thing of support for the teachers, for people. Now, I know that not every teacher, they don't always have the say so. They're not always right. There are some, things, but honestly, as a whole, I think that there's just not enough support for the behavior of the students. We have a cell phone issue right now where you can't get these kids to get off those phones. They're staying up 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, falling asleep. You know what I'm saying? Because parents aren't on alert like they need to be. And this education system is hurting. What do you say to that?
It's funny that you bring that up because recently, I want to say like within the last few months, there was an article that came out, and I'm blanking as to which state it was. I want to say it was in Ohio, but don't quote me. There was a school district that banned cell phones. And they have seen a complete turnaround with students as far as their mental health and just their like ability to focus and concentrate in school. So, I mean, there's evidence out there that it would actually be beneficial for students. But, I know a lot of people are also against things like that. That's another, it is a huge issue when it comes to, problematic behavior, challenging behavior from
Yeah.
students. After being a teacher for so long, I can say that I feel like I saw the full spectrum as far as like there were parents who, absolutely stayed on top of it,
Yeah.
were constantly monitoring their kids. And then of course I saw the other extreme where kind of like, oh wow, uh,
That's right.
people. And I can't judge, but as a teacher, it is sad when you see that. You see the potential in a student, and if they had the right boundaries and parameters at home, they would flourish. But
Absolutely.
your day, you're not their parent, so you don't get
Right.
dictate how that goes. So
Yeah, 100%. And I think you said something, you said, I don't judge. I really want to make a statement on that because I think as a society, we've gotten so comfortable with always saying, I'm not going to judge. Can I tell you that sometimes it's not a judgment. You have to help people identify some situations that may be affecting them. If I can help identify that a parent is not on top of things and keeping the phones away, hiding the phones from their children, whatever, because the kids, they go through everything to get their phones at night and whatever. And I just think it's not everything's a judgment. Some things are, you help identify. It is our responsibility, as if you're an educator, if you're whatever position you're in and you're in charge of a group of people, we've got to throw that out the window because our job is to help identify. And I really think that if teachers had more support from parents, and even maybe even helping parents become more aware, there is a problem with students falling asleep in the classrooms because they are on their phones at 1, 2, 3, 4 a.m. They are. And that's hurting. So what do teachers have to do? They have to stop. They're dealing with behavior issues. Then they're dealing with grades. They're dealing with sliding. Their grades are starting to hurt, and you can't even get their attention to explain something to them. So you're having to do a million things in the classroom at one time. So this issue with education, unfortunately, it used to be the funding and somewhat of the STARR test, but I think now we're throwing in their issues such as the cell phone, mental health issues for teachers, physical issues for teachers. What can we say first? What can we say to parents that will help if parents are watching this, and we can say something that will help, first of all, inform parents, but also help parents get on our side as well. And I say on the side of the teachers, what can we say to them?
I think one of the most important things that parents can do is really view your child as a partner. There's a lot of things on the internet that go viral and clickbait and things like that that try to highlight these like negative things that happen between parents and teachers. But at the end of the day, teachers care about their students. Are if you view them as partners to work, whatever it is they're doing in the classroom, reinforce it at home. That would I think would be very beneficial for children.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be willing to have conversations, maybe tough conversations. If your child happens to be one of those challenging students, know that the teacher is from a place where they want to help. But a lot of times also they have 30 other students in that classroom that they also have to attend to. We wish that we had the ability to work one-on-one with every single one.
Right.
What a perfect world that would be, but that's not how it works. And so give grace to who are maybe still learning, haven't really, they can give us all.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Well, and we definitely want to remind those who are out there making decisions for us as people, parents, teachers, that it's time to get to the table together and do something about the funding. Clearly my guest, Jacqueline Martinez, she is definitely on the side of, helping out the lower income students and looking out for them. And I'm all for that as well. But I would like to propose that we are there for everybody, the lower income, the middle class, and even the rich. That's their money. So what can we do? I should say that's their money also. So what can we do in this next session to make things look better in the education system? And here you have it from a teacher. We would propose that you get rid of the STARR. We propose that you get some money on the table ASAP for everybody. And any last words, Jacqueline, as we wrap up this wonderful interview?
No, I want to say thank you so much for inviting me to come on to the show. I feel honored that, I'm the first, I guess, non-conservative to come on the show. I appreciate the conversations that we have and the way that we so much to you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm honored that you were on as well. And I can't wait. I'm going to bring you back on so we can take one topic at a time concerning education, because listen, we could deal with so many different aspects of the education system this, we kind of bundled it all together just to make sure we had plenty to cover. But we're in a time where it's very, very important to pay attention to what's going on in the education system. We need to make sure we're contacting our elected officials and tell them, hey, we care about these things. You need to speak up. Here's what's important to us. Here's what we're seeing. Here's what we are experiencing. Even if you just have to leave a message. I have the mentor teacher that was working with me. He would tell me, I left a voicemail at so-and-so's office and I feel better. They didn't pick up the phone, but I feel better. And hey, if that's all it takes, then so be it. I mean, that is their job, to hear what the constituents are saying. So we encourage you to reach out and find out who represents you. How are they representing you? What is their job? And so speak up, guys, speak up. And guess what? I think one of the most important topics that need to be taken on is teacher involvement, which I think is going to be one of the next topics we need to talk about, because you ran for school board, and we're not going to get into that right this minute, but we need more teachers to pay attention, run, and be a voice for the rest of the education community. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
100%. Well, Jacqueline, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I can't wait to have you on again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Take care.